Testing one, two. Please be standing for Her Worshipful the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor.
Welcome to the meeting of the Council. My name is Councillor Beth Rowland. I am the Mayor of Wokingham and I will chair this meeting. Before we start, I'd like to go through a few preliminaries. Please note that the meeting is currently being webcast live, and a reminder to members that they need to stand when speaking in the chamber. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We do. We have Councillor Peace Dennis, Councillor Sarah Kerr, Councillor Morag Malvern, Councillor Jackie Rance and Councillor Chris Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've also got apologies from Bill Sohn.
Are there any declarations of interest? And we have no public questions. We now move to the appointment of an honorary alderman. In accordance with the protocol of the appointment of the honorary alderman of Wokingham Borough Council, as agreed at the annual council meeting held on the 19th of May 2016 and amended in 2018, a nomination has been received for a past member of council, Councillor Angus Ross, to be conferred with the title of honorary alderman. Council is asked to consider this nomination and whether to confer the title of honorary alderman on Mr. Ross. I would like to read out the recommendation that we will be considering this evening. The recommendation is that this council, in sincere appreciation of the distinguished public service rendered by him to the Borough of Wokingham, does hereby admit Mr. Angus Ross to be an honorary alderman of the Borough of Wokingham, in recognition of his untiring service over a period of 32 years to the people of the borough, and particularly to those of Wokingham without ward, on committees of the council, including as an executive member, to local organisations, including the Royal Berkshire Fire Authority, and in the offices of chairman and mayor. I understand that Councillor Pauline Jorgensen is proposing this report. Is that correct, Pauline? Is there a seconder? Thank you, Stephen. Pauline, would you like to speak to the report? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm delighted to nominate Angus Ross as an honorary alderman. Angus has a long and distinguished service as a councillor. He first joined the council in 1990, and in that time served in almost every position on the authority. In addition to a long period as chairman of the planning committee, where his encyclopedic knowledge of planning rules and guidance was very useful, he was a member of the executive for several years. Most importantly, he served as the last chairman of the Old Wokingham district and the first mayor of the new Wokingham borough. Alongside this, he was a member of the Royal Berkshire Fire Authority for 22 years and acted as the Borough Council's Armed Forces champion. Throughout his long service, Angus was a committed councillor for Wokingham without ward, acting as a real champion for the local community. He was at the forefront of improving walking routes in the area, particularly helping children get to school. He worked hard to stand up for his residents on planning issues and played a key role in developing the latest borough planning guidance. As executive member for the environment, he championed trees and rural affairs, including a role as an active member of the Veteran Trees Association. He also started work putting in place the borough's leisure strategy. He set up and established the Friends of Heathlake, a very active local volunteer group. Angus's time on the Fire Authority saw him serve as lead member for assets. He helped secure new fire engines for the borough, spearheaded getting a new fire station in Wokingham, in Crowthorne and in Theale, and was a leading light in establishing the Thames Valley Fire Control Service. Following 20 years' service in the RAF between 1958 and 1978, as a Canberra bomber pilot, flying instructor, and latterly as staff officer, Angus devoted more than 3 decades of his life to public service as a councillor, during which time he has helped foster many positive changes in the borough. During his time as a councillor, he demonstrated an overwhelming commitment to the borough and its residents. His contribution has been exemplary, demonstrated through his work as executive member, his service on committees and outside bodies, his membership of the Fire Authority, his role as armed forces champion, and his time as chairman and mayor, where he acted as a superb ambassador for the borough, both to local residents and to the rest of the country. Since stepping down, he has remained active, most recently opening the refurbished memorial to RAF Training Command in Shinfield. For his remarkable life of public service, both in the borough and before, I would like to propose that Angus Ross is appointed to the rank of Honorary Alderman, the highest honour that the Borough Council can bestow on a former councillor.
Would the seconder like to speak now or reserve his right?
I think I'll reserve my right, if I may, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Pauline, and thank you, Stephen, for reserving your right. There is now an opportunity for members to speak. I have a list of speakers gathered by Democratic Services, but if you would like to speak and have not informed Democratic Services, can you please raise your hand now and we will make a note. Councillor Baker, Councillor Eunice. Did Clive raise
Is that Michelle Shepherd Dubai or not?
Our list of speakers has been provided to Democratic Services.
While we wait for the list, I'm going to exercise my right as mayor and speak first. So I've asked myself and I said yes. I'd just like to briefly speak about Angus, who I have, of course, known for many years in this chamber and without. Angus is a gentleman. He always has been and he always will be. And I thank him for that, because the behaviour of a gentleman is always fair and honest. And yes, he gets cross and yes, he gets angry, but he's always a gentleman. But that isn't what I'd actually wanted to say. A few weeks ago, when we had our summer, it was one very hot day and we were opening the RAF memorial that Angus had been involved in, and Pauline and Norman were there and a few other members of the public, and it was a jolly hot day. We stood under the shelter as much as we could, but we spoke to each other as colleagues for quite a long time, which was a pleasure. When we got to the formal part of the ceremony, one of the ladies is there, and I'm not going to say one of the elderly ladies because she was probably younger than me, felt very faint. She, in fact, did faint, and she was standing by, you've all seen my walker in and out of here, she was standing by my walker and we used that to support her. And it was very clear for a while that the best place for her would be home, and Angus took command there, and she didn't live very far away, and helped use my walker to actually carry her home. That was the act of a gentleman. That was the act of someone who cared. And that was the act of someone who was willing to put himself forward to serve members of the public. And that was a selfless act because it was hot. And Angus, like me, is getting older. And so for all of the people there, most of whom were younger than us, that was sacrifice. And that's what Angus is about. And I'd like to say thank you. And thank you to Pauline and Norman as well, who helped with that on that very hot day to take that lady home where she could be better served. Okay, I think we now have a list. Councillor Croy, would you like to speak, please?
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm disappointed that this meeting has gone ahead, and I'm disappointed with the report. The report says the cost of the items to be purchased will be met from the Mayor's and Democratic Services budget. The report does not state the cost of holding this meeting, nor the cost.
Up a little.
My apologies, Madam. Can I start again?
You're too tall for the microphone.
But you've got a lead. Okay, I will talk louder. I guess the point of mentioning the Democratic Services budget was to try and put some distance between the total cost of this evening and the huge budgetary pressure in areas such as children's services, adult social care, home to school transport and emptying the bins, to name a few. Residents expect and deserve every penny of their council tax to be spent on delivering basic services well. If the borough cannot deliver basic services to the standard reasonably expected by residents, the council loses the moral authority to demand that residents forego core services. Let's remind ourselves, every £1,000 spent this evening is £1,000 not available in the reserves at the end of the year. And every £1,000 not in the reserves at the end of the year is £1,000 less for future spending on vital services. But I have a confession to make. The Alderman Protocol was adopted in May 2016. This was my first meeting of the council. Looking back at the video, I can see that I voted for the adoption of the protocol. Looking back at the minutes of the same meeting, I see that when the dust had settled on all of the appointments to outside bodies and committees, I came away with a grand total of 1, the WB representative to age concern. This poor harvest was to be repeated at annual council the following year. The fact is, unless one is a member of a ruling group, one is never going to amass the years of eminent service that would warrant nomination for this type of role. It's also highly unlikely that unless one is very skillful or lucky in one's choice of ward, the pool of potential recipients of this role is very small indeed. Had I, in my first meeting of the council, appreciated this more clearly, I do not think I would have voted for the role. After the current review of the Constitution, I will not be supporting the continuation of the role. Now, clearly the amounts this evening are not huge, and I suspect not a single resident cares about tonight's meeting. But leadership involves taking the right decisions even when people are not looking. And leadership involves taking the right decisions even when others do not know you have taken that decision. And leadership sometimes involves not doing the things we would like to do. I'm sure the vote tonight will have the necessary 2/3 majority, but this meeting should never have been initiated, and this meeting should never have been supported, and we will not be complicit in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Floyd. Councillor Rochelle Shepherd-Dubé, please.
I've known Angus for quite a while, first as my in-law's neighbour, then as a borough councillor. He's always been knowledgeable and a good man. I may not have always agreed with him in his politics, but I respected him, and he would never utter absolute nonsense or try to prevaricate to push an issue. He was on the Fire Authority for 22 years. He also decided to build, he didn't personally build them, but he was on the committee that built the tri-service emergency services in Hungerford, Crowthorne, and Field. He's also been the integral member of the Armed Forces Veteran Hub and the Armed Forces Member Honorary Champion. He is just the example of what a gentleman should be and is. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Councillor Pauline Hellier-Simons, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very happy to support this resolution. I would have seconded the motion, but I was beaten to it. although that's perhaps appropriate, because a long while ago I've tried to persuade councillors to create the post of alderman. I can't remember if it was while I was chairman of the district council or when I was mayor, but at that time they weren't minded to do so. So I was absolutely delighted when Keith Baker succeeded, because there's no one who deserves it more than Angus Ross. Speaking in favour of this is one of the pleasantest jobs I've done on this council. I've known Angus better, I think, than any other councillor, past or present, since I was already a councillor when Angus was elected 32 years ago, and was his fellow ward councillor for all that time. He became a councillor at a dark midwinter by-election in Wokingham Without, where only a few dozen people turned out to vote. But it couldn't have been a better result. As my fellow ward councillor, he was exemplary. I've seen his commitment and how hard he worked in all areas, how much of a team worker he was with successive Wokingham Without councillors, and how very well respected he was by the residents, whom he always did his very best to engage with and help. His knowledge of planning was second to none. There was very genuine sadness by our local residents when they learned that he was stepping down from the council. Others will talk more about the huge work he's done for the borough, although I will mention his superb competence as chairman of the planning committee for many years, and as chairman and then as mayor. And he was well respected and liked here as well, I believe by people of all parties. He was invariably polite and courteous, always calm and rational, and he spoke sense. This was the same for his 22 years on the Fire Authority, where he spearheaded some superb work. Among his many other leading roles, he worked with Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Fire Services to integrate the Thames Valley Control Centre, where 999 calls are taken, and chaired the Assets Committee for several years, where he saw through the modernisation of Hungerford Fire Station and the building of 2 brand new fire stations in Crowthorne and Thiel, integrating them with all the police and ambulance services. He was also on the panel which appointed some of the best chief fire officers Berkshire has ever had. The fire service was equally sorry to see him go, and in recognition of his work, awarded him a silver fireman's axe. As his fellow councillor, I have missed Angus and his wisdom, but I'm delighted he has agreed to accept this award for all his hard work and commitment to this council.
Thank you, Pauline. Clive Jones, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Angus, and it's lovely to see you and lovely to see your family here as well. And I mustn't forget to say good evening to former councillors David Slight, David Lee, and up there Malcolm Richards. It's a pleasure to be supporting this well-deserved honour that the council is bestowing on you tonight. Serving residents and the council for 32 years is an incredible achievement, and doing so with charm, clarity and courtesy is something that is not achieved by everybody. You have actually achieved that, and Angus, as the mayor said, you are a true gentleman. Shortly after I joined the council in 2016, I was appointed as the opposition spokesman for the environment. You were the executive member for the environment. This led to many exchanges between the two of us that were always conducted, as I've said, with courtesy and respect. Angus always gave proper, factual replies, which is a contrast to some of the replies from some of his colleagues at the time, which were often peppered with politics rather than facts. Outside the chamber, I've met Angus several times when he's collecting funds for the Thames Valley Air Ambulance that he supports and continues to support now. Again, he would be unfailingly courteous and pleasant. And when I remarked to his charity colleagues that Angus was a councillor you could respect and work with, even though you were from a different political persuasion, he certainly couldn't be described as tribal. They were often surprised that two councillors from different parties could be respectful to each other. But tonight shows that that can definitely happen. When Angus stood down at the 2022 elections, it was clear that his experience and his wise counsel would be missed by his group. Stephen and I considered nominating you, Angus, to be an alderman, but decided to give your own group a few months to do this. And we were very pleased that they have done so, and we wholeheartedly support your nomination. I, and I know the rest of the group, wish you much happiness and good health in your retirement. And although you have moved out of the borough, I'm sure you'll continue your affection and concern for the borough residents that you have served for so long. Angus, you are exactly the right kind of former councillor who should be an alderman of the borough.
Councillor Laura Blumenthal, please.
Angus, you have been an exemplary role model and public servant to the residents of this borough. I remember when I first joined this council in my early 20s as baby of the council, feeling pretty bewildered. You're an excellent mentor, always patient, a great sounding board, wise, and then, as now, respected across this chamber. And I remember thinking then, as I do still today, if I could be half as good a councillor as Angus Ross, I'd be pretty excellent. You're an inspiration, Mr. Ross. Thank you so much for the service that you've given to our residents, and it's very well deserved for you being an honorary alderman. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Councillor Jordan Montgomery, please. Sorry, he's just gone out. We'll move on. Councillor Shahid Yunus, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Fellow councillors, today it's a special day. We gather here to bestow appointment of Angus Ross as honorary alderman. By conferring this title, we acknowledge the eminent services he has rendered to the council and the residents of Woking Borough. Angus was one of the longest, if not the longest. Pauline told me she's a longest serving councillor of Woking Borough Council over 32 years. He held various prominent portfolios, amongst others, executive member of planning, executive, chairman of numerous scrutiny committees, mayor of the borough, and serving on the Royal Berkshire Fire Authority for over 22 years. We have all observed that throughout his tenure, Angus demonstrated unwavering dedication, commitment, and the deep sense of service for our town and the residents of Woking Borough. He's consistently put his needs of others before his own, making a profound difference in the lives of many individuals, young and old, leaving behind a legacy of compassion, empathy, and inclusivity. Angus, I've personally known you for the last 12 years. Thank you for your support, advice, and mentorship. As elected councillors, I would like to believe that we are here due to our strong commitment to public service, a passion for our communities, and putting the needs of the communities above our personal interest. This is not easy. It requires personal and family sacrifice and giving up our most precious asset we all have, which is our time. Angus, your dedication and commitment has not gone unnoticed. In conclusion, I would like to say thank you to Angus. You exemplify the true spirit of altruism and civic responsibility. We're not only celebrating your past achievement, but also draw inspiration from your journey. Your passion and dedication reminds us, all of us, that each one of us holds each one of us holds to make a positive difference in our communities. As Mahatma Gandhi reminds us, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. I hope you will all vote tonight and join me in congratulating Angus and thanking our newest honorary alderman and for the outstanding service and commitment. Together, let us continue to build a borough that is a great place to live, to grow and do business in, a borough that thrives on compassion, unity and progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahid. Councillor David Cornish, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As one of the new members of the council, the year of my election coincided with Angus deciding to step down, and therefore I've never shared a time with him in this chamber, and indeed I cannot claim to know him as well as many people here. But I wished to speak tonight because I know Angus more by reputation than in person, and in his case, a reputation amongst those who weren't his political bedfellows, but who held a sincere respect for his contribution to the residents of this borough. When I first became involved in local politics, many people I met were happy to share their views of political activists of other parties, and it's fair to say that not all of those observations focused solely on the positive. But I never heard anyone say a bad word about Angus. The most frequent comments from those of a different political persuasion to him were, his heart's in the right place, or he's one of the old-fashioned ones, decent enough chap. Praise indeed from those on the other side of the bench. I generally found that the longer a person had been involved in local matters, the greater the respect they had for Angus. Angus, when I first had contact with you, doing something on behalf of Finchampstead Parish Council some years ago, you were usually, in fact always, the first to answer a message, and were always helpful in doing so when it'd been far more easy just to bat things off and leave it to somebody else. In the time since, when we have met and spoken, you have been unfailingly courteous and pleasant, but, and I must say wholly unintentionally, also leaving me with a slightly uncomfortable sensation that I really need to keep my standards up. In times steeped in political polemic, your behaviour and style set an example to us all. And I may say in particular that your social media profile gives a lesson to too many people in this chamber. I will close by sharing a memory of a wet and windy weekend. I think it must be my first campaign in the borough. It was a weekend morning many years back, and we bumped into each other, each delivering campaign leaflets on our own, somewhere in the back end of Evendon's ward. It was a foul morning, and to me, the sensible thing to do was to share out each other's leaflets between us, get the job done, go home and dry out. So I started across the road with that in mind. But I then hesitated and retreated, uncertain of the response and that I get, and perhaps I'm breaking some protocol or committing some ghastly political faux pas. Angus, I never want to know what you would have said if I'd actually asked, because I'm still young and naive and I don't want my illusions shattered. But I think it speaks volumes of you and your reputation that I even considered the idea, and I can think of few others who could inspire the thought of trusting and respecting a political opponent in that way. It would have been an honour to have worked alongside you in this chamber, but I am delighted to support your nomination as Alderman.
Thank you, David. Councillor Keith Baker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You've heard quite a few praises, really, to Angus, and you're probably going to hear more. So I thought I would take this opportunity to look at it from a different angle, to highlight, especially to newer members like David, of this council, exactly what you have to do to qualify for such an accolade. I was very privileged and proud when I was leader in 2016 to be the person promoting the creation of Aldermans of Wokingham Borough Council and getting it implemented. It is a very elite club to belong to, with only one other retired councillor ever to have been awarded the title of Honorary Alderman. And I refer to the legendary Bob Wyatt, who unfortunately is no longer with us. So what do you have to do to be nominated as an Honorary Alderman? Well, one of the first things is you have to have at least 20 years continuous period as a councillor, and you're retired. Very few councillors reach this milestone. And for those that do, it's not automatic that they will become an honorary alderman. This award is not just a question of waiting to pass that 20-year trigger point. It's much more than that. And another criteria is, what have you actually done in those 20 years? Well, I hope you will all agree that Angus has satisfied those requirements in an exceptional way, serving on the council and as council representative on outside bodies. There is one role that Angus is absolutely unique, with no one able to repeat that performance. It was Angus, as chairman of this council, who brilliantly steered this council from a district to a borough council. It ultimately required the Queen to grant permission to do just that, which she did. And on the wall over there, you can see the document granting us that change. And one of the key changes to this was the chairman of the council was converted to the mayor of the council. Needless to say, there was only one person who deserved the right to be our very first mayor. So Angus not only was the first councillor to be our mayor, but he was also the first councillor to be both chairman and mayor. And so he reached that final hurdle. This is the universal acceptance of the current councillors through the vote tonight, to agree to award the title of Honorary Alderman to Angus. As with the whole process, a high hurdle of acceptance is required, with at least 2/3 of those present voting to agree. So you need to have at least 20 years as a councillor. You have to have demonstrated dedicated service and made significant contributions to both the council and its residents. And thirdly, you simply need to be liked by 2/3 of those present. So I hope you all agree that Angus Ross has significantly satisfied all the required criteria for an honorary alderman, and you all vote to demonstrate your personal acknowledgement of what he has done. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith Baker. Councillor Stephen Conway. Oh, sorry, Jordan. Councillor Jordan Montgomery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and my apologies for going to the toilet at exactly the wrong time. When I first stood for election 6 years ago, I was up against Angus. I was a young man then. Many in this chamber might still argue I'm a young man now. I understandably found this to be a slightly daunting event, knocking on the doors of strangers, putting my face and name through letterboxes. I was bleach blonde in my hair then, and fortunately it's not so embarrassing anymore. However, what may have caused me the most worry was that I would not only have to meet my opponent, one with 25 years of experience in the council business at that point, but who I would have to remain standing beside for at least a couple of hours outside the polling station. Again, this was an entirely new experience for me. I feared there may have been some resentment towards this university student attempting to challenge such a seasoned councillor. At that point, Angus had spent more time in the RAF than I had been alive on this planet. Angus welcomed me warmly, and my fears were entirely unfounded. He greeted me without a hint of animosity, and for the next 2 hours, these were passed by with friendly chats on a variety of topics. His time in the forces, national politics, Brexit. He expressed a genuine interest in my studies and the content of my degree. In short, unlike the adversarial scenes I had seen within the House of Commons or on any other social media, Angus had taught me that even those from rival parties could be civil towards one another and even jovial. And I could not have asked for a better introduction to electoral politics. In the years following, I discovered that my impression of Angus was not unique. In fact, it was difficult to find anyone with a bad thing to say about him. even amongst those residents of Woking Without who did not vote for him or agree with his politics, nonetheless had a great deal of respect for him. When I joined the parish council, the sentiment amongst members there was the same. He was considered a hard-working, considerate councillor, and above all else, a gentleman. So on behalf of the residents and Woking Without Parish Council, thank you, and I'll be honoured to support tonight's vote.
Thank you, everyone who's spoken. And now Stephen Conway is going to exercise his right as seconder.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. One of the problems of reserving your right on an occasion like this is there's not much left to say that hasn't been said already. What I did want to do before I make the main points I wanted to make was just briefly allude to the Labour Party's position on this. And I completely understand their concerns about the concept of an honorary alderman. But I'm sure even the Labour group would agree that this is tonight less about a matter of principle and more about a person. And it's on the person I want to really focus our attention. I've known Angus since the mid-90s, when I first joined the council, and I served with him on the planning committee over many, many years. I greatly admired his measured assessment of complex applications and his deft guidance of the committee towards sound and defensible decisions. The committee often didn't realise it was being deftly guided, but it was. That was the deftness of the guidance. The qualities he brought to the planning committee were evident in all aspects of his work on the council. A clear and logical mind, an ability to get to the heart of the matter, and an unfailing courtesy in dealing with those who held different views. To be sure, Angus could be combative. I was on the receiving end of his sharp tongue on a few occasions, but he never made the mistake of seeing opponents as enemies to be done down at every opportunity. The phrase "a true gentleman," we've heard it mentioned quite a few times this evening. I have to say, usually it's overused and extended perhaps beyond its natural boundaries, but I can think of no one to whom this phrase could better apply than to Angus. Angus was highly regarded by the electorate of his ward. I know this not just because Pauline and Jordan have told me. I know it from my own personal experience. I spent some time in the recent elections helping our excellent candidate Jordan Montgomery, now elected. In my doorstep conversations, even with Jordan's supporters, I heard countless times what a good and conscientious ward councillor Angus was. All these qualities, Madam Mayor, and the length of Angus's service to the borough make him a very suitable candidate for an honorary alderman. Indeed, I can think of no one more worthy of this recognition.
Thank you, Stephen. All members who indicated that they wish to speak have now spoken. We now move to a vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendations as set out in the report on page 5, please raise your hands. Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The recommendation is carried. We have now voted, and it's Angus's turn to stand and receive a scroll.
How could I forget them? My phone. Madam Mayor, councillors, officers, and guests. This is an honour, and I'm privileged to have been afforded this recognition. Thank you for the kind words that's been expressed this evening from all sides of the council, which makes it especially gratifying to me that I'm not quite sure I recognise myself at times. All you said now puts an onus on me not to repeat too many things, and if I do hesitate, it's because I don't want to repeat too much. As has been mentioned before, this honorary position was first granted in 2016 to our late great friend and prominent councillor and advocate for so many groups, Bob Wyatt. There are many others, though, who have given a lot to this council and to the residents and businesses of our borough. I do consider that I'm representing those other past councillors who have given so much to the community. Personally, I hope more councillors will be recognised for their contributions in the future, and this seems to me a very appropriate way to identify and to reward them publicly. I do thank you all for attending this meeting within all your busy diaries. Also for giving me the opportunity to address you. In my retirement, I still remember very clearly the call on councillors' time to fully meet the commitment of being an elected community representative. This evening is an extra call on your time, and I'm indebted to you all for making it, and that is all of you. Of course, one of the delights of being an ex-councillor is one's freer to say what one really thinks. I believe now, perhaps even more than when I was a councillor, that getting the balance of firstly, one's responsibilities to one's ward residents and businesses, secondly, the borough's residents and businesses, and lastly, the political party imperatives can be testing, and this has been referred to earlier this evening. At this local level, I still believe that the party political part, can sometimes get in the way of serving the best interests of the borough. At times in the past, I recall situations where the councillors have not acted together as a joined-up council on issues where, fundamentally, the great majority of councillors individually supported that issue. This is perhaps easy to say now from the sidelines, but nevertheless, I've always considered that joint party working does come to the fore easily. It does not come to the fore easily enough. Rather, the tendency in trying to get a particular party's policy seems solely to be theirs. I remember times when cross-party, officer-supported working parties were convened, and these always led to better agreed outcomes. But perhaps it's not for me to lecture you now, and I'll resist and restrict my rant to that one area. May I now indulge myself to reflect on those 32 years that so many of you have referred to, and especially representing Woking Without. I suppose you could say now without Angus. So often that word without was thrown at us by my ward residents over their local feelings. And as has been said, I was elected in 1990. It was the first of 11 elections, amusingly, once unopposed. Did I have the largest or smallest majority? Who knows? Actually, 11 is the same as the number of chief executives that I have seen in this chamber. I've been privileged to have represented the residents of Woking Without. I enjoyed various ways to make and keep contact with the residents, schools and organisations, including the quarterly Crowthorne Eye magazine, delivered to all homes in what might be termed Greater Crowthorne, the Bracknell and Wokingham parts, to engage in a local dialogue on a non-party basis. It's a good way to get and stay locally involved, Crowthorne being more joined by community than split by separate councils. You heard I had the privilege of being elected the chairman in 2006, and just after getting my chain around my neck, managed to get the council to bring a motion, to agree a motion to petition the Queen for Woking to achieve borough status. The scroll granting this, as been referred to, is on the wall, and the previous chain is there. A small party from here collected it from the House of Lords post room, where we eventually found it unattended in a corner. The post room staff being totally unaware what the cardboard tube containing the scroll was. We went with a photographer, one Stuart Turkington, here tonight, still here. I hate to think how many pictures you've taken to me over the years, Stuart, but you do a great job. So there I was, the first borough mayor. The whole process was at nil cost to the council, as I'd worked with the officer team to get contributions from many of the businesses in the borough for the scroll, the new regalia, as worn by the mayor today, the oak tree planted outside this building, and the celebration function held at the Oracle PLC as their contribution. The event was attended by the Lord Lieutenant and many councillors and dignitaries from the parishes, towns, borough, and county. The then leader was a reluctant supporter of this change of status and blocked any expenditure, including on adapting the signs on the borough's roads, parks, etc., from district to borough. This, I see, yet to be fully achieved over the last 16 years. I can live in hope. You've heard my fortune to have had various involvements in the council over the years, and the last was to help improve the awareness of our armed forces and our responsibilities towards those in the borough who are serving, their families, and our many forces veterans. We established the appointment of an armed forces champion amongst councillors each year, and I was pleased to take that role. I do urge the council to continue to work towards best practice in its policies around Armed Forces Covenant that was adopted in 2013 and you all refocused in 2022. As has been said, my longest involvement was in planning, an absorbing area, but where you quickly find you'll never satisfy all the people all the time. Chairing meetings with a large number of public attending that were very vocally opposed to the issue being debated was an interesting challenge. I was the executive member for planning for some years as the then new 2010 local plan was bedded in, together with adopting a number of supplementary planning guides and a revised borough design guide. I believe that all are now under a long-awaited review. I initiated two planning award schemes, design award schemes in 1993 and 2007, which at that time highlighted good development. Whilst design is sometimes controversial and subjective, I found that attention to it does lead to much better developments, and this in turn can lead to better communities with all the social and environmental benefits that brings. I then had 5 years as executive member for environment, and much of that has been referred to. It was a very enjoyable time to me, and I believe a successful period for the council when we developed plans and financed the now completed leisure centres, established self-funding and expansion of facilities at our great council country parks, developed the new ongoing greenway and public rights-of-way and tree programmes, and one little programme that I still enjoy seeing the benefit of is the introduction of wildflowers into our meadow, into our verges and ancillary green spaces. With this portfolio, I was keen to support sport and leisure with work on diversity and inclusion, getting more people active and also active supporting those recovering from serious medical conditions. Long may the council's support continue, working with the Sport Council, where I continue involvement. I must add that I do appreciate that in all these areas, much more progress has been made in the intervening 6 years since I've stepped away from that role. I worked on the policies and budgets for each of these areas with many committed and hardworking officers who then implemented what we can see around the borough today. I want to place on record my thanks to the many officers I worked with to achieve what we did in all these areas over those years. They did the work. A major involvement, as has been referred to, was my time on the Fire Authority, where I worked with incredibly focused, professional and dedicated team of officers. And as you've heard, I was involved with fire control, new fire stations, including the one in Wokingham, which now gives you, the town and the area 24/7 cover. And again, with the Air Force, with the Armed Forces links. To me, our county's fire service was an exemplar in joint officer and member working. I left the council last year with few regrets after 32 years, as it was high time a younger person came in with new energy, ideas, and different experience to draw on. Keep it up, David. My successor. I'm delighted that my family have come here today, and of course now Christine does not have to have meal times dictated by council anymore. Also, may I thank the council supporting me here tonight, ex-councillors David Lee, who gave me opportunities when he was leader, this after my time as mayor, when I genuinely thought that my council involvement had effectively ended. And David Slight, who was a very dedicated and hard-working colleague. Of course, my other ward colleague has been referred to, Pauline Heller-Simons, is still with you, and as she said, I think, has been a councillor even longer than I was. So may I thank my many borough councillor colleagues for their support over these years, the residents of Woking Without for keeping electing me, and for the many opportunities I've been offered in the council, which has led to your unexpected but humbling recognition today. Nowadays, I can view the borough from our home, fully 600 yards from the borough boundary, with our views from our apartment in Henley to see the wooded vistas of the independent Republic of Remenham. This is how I referred to it from the last leader. It was John Halsall's bailiwick. In drawing my speech to a close, may I apologise to everyone for causing the delay in this ceremony, as the first agreed date coincided with a close family member's funeral in Scotland. I appreciate the efforts Democratic Services, Priya and Madeleine, had to go undergo to get this evening eventually to happen. I will, of course, as Honorary Alderman, plan to keep a close link with you, the council, and the local community, as detailed in the role description in the protocol for this appointment. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for this occasion, which I will always remember as a humbling but rewarding and memorable mark of my association with the council. Thank you, friends and councillors, and of course your predecessors. May the council continue to be what I saw as a councillor as one of the strongest and highly innovative and sound councils in the country. Good fortune to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angus. While you're still here, I'm going to formally close the meeting, knowing that we have some paperwork to sign up here, and I'm sure Stuart will be up to take some photographs of us. But I'd like to invite all members here in the council to join us in the boardroom for a drink and maybe a crisp or two. As soon as we've finished, Angus and his guests will join you in there. Thank you. The meeting is now closed.